I like the tornado rod. It gets rid of tiles on the floor with the wind, and it makes Link go upwards to higher levels. At one point on my first playthrough, I thought I had to use a tornado rod in a very precise small area to get a key that was on a small ledge, when it turned out I had to fuse with a wall instead to get it. But it worked, and I thought I was supposed to do it that way because the tornado rod makes you go up. It's just weird because you'd expect what's basically the wind rod at long last to send wind forwards to enemies to blow them away, like a sustained version of the gust jar, or that fan item from Skyward Sword. But it just sends you up, which is more creative. Ravio talks as if because you're renting him your home, it's only a logical conclusion that you're restrained to renting stuff from him. The problem with that is, later on by the Dark World, yeah, I'm going to be calling Lorule the Dark World interchangeably by the way, he lets you buy the items for good. Maybe he thought he'd get actual customers here and he wanted to give them a chance to buy them, which they wouldn't have if you held onto your rented items forever. But he never says that. So being able to buy them for a high price later on just makes the whole they rob you of your items when you die at the hard part of the game mechanic feel even more arbitrary and forced. Because they could have just let you buy everything from the start, and they should have, because the beginning is the part of the game where you have the least hearts and are the most likely to die and lose all those items. Not to mention that if Ravio is trying to help the hero of the world, he should let you buy stuff instead of renting stuff, and therefore creating the risk that some random traveler will rent away an item that Link needs to beat the game, which would have never happened if he had just let him buy everything from the start. It fails in-universe as well as out-of-universe. At least it's expensive to buy items, so it's a great money sink, which Zelda games desperately need. But you still end up absolutely needing that 9,999 wallet you conveniently start out with for once. It feels wrong that I have to rent the bombs instead of just finding them from beating enemies. And not only that, but the bombs of all things run off the regenerating meter. I don't care about the we have infinite ammo now thing. You had so much ammo in the original all the time from enemy drops and stuff. You might as well have had infinite ammo. So I take limited bombs and arrows that I'll never run out of to being limited to only place 3 at once any day. It's not a big deal though. When would you ever need to place 3 bombs at once anyways? It's just weird. Why would placing bombs drain a stamina meter? What is magic meter draining about placing bombs? And why does Ravio always waste your time with an unskippable text box and the camera panning to him every single time you leave his store, and even before he sets the store up? This never happened in the original game. He left the store and it was no big deal. Now I'm taking a break. Even then, it's not because I was told to, it's because I'm tired of the game. Compare this to A Link to the Past, where in randomizers I play half the entire game in one sitting no problem. Here I haven't even beaten 2 dungeons and I'm 2 days into the game at the time of this typing because I keep quitting from sheer exasperation at it. How many flaws am I up to now? The giant pink Maimai talks weird in the French version. She only ever uses the infinitive of verbs, the non-conjugated basic version of them, and she only ever uses the stress pronouns, not the normal subject pronouns. So she'd say toi and moi instead of tu and me or je, and pouvoir and vouloir and voir. So she'd say toi voir, for example, which is weird. Is that supposed to be French's way of having caveman speech? I don't know. I love the way the Maimai side quests, or Meille as spelled in French, is handled to make the Collectathon not tediously unplayable like the pose. First off, you hear a squeaking if you're near one, although you can only take advantage of that if you have the volume up. Second, you can tap an icon on the map to tell you how many of the Maimais are left in every area in the game. And third, some of them are out in the open, rather than all of them being hidden under bushes or stuff. Most of them are hidden, but still. 2 problems though. First, the Maimais only appear after you've talked to the giant Maimai, which is especially glaring since there is one clinging to a wall right outside the cave of the Mother Maimai that wasn't there before you talked to her. This game loves doing that. I already know about these guys. They should already be lost, but I guess Link doesn't, so he needs the map icon given to him. Still, if the mother knows how many of them are in each area, if she's magical enough to know that, why isn't she magical enough to teleport out of the cave she's sealed in and find them all herself? Still, getting item upgrades for them is awesome. The second problem is that every time you get one, the game reminds you what they are with the text box. It does that with every treasure chest too. Why can't the game be like the Link to the Past randomizer and just not have text for chest items, period? Or at least be like the original where they don't feel the need to have a funny message about don't spend it all in one place, literally every time you find a chest with 20 rupees. I ended up getting 3 bottles before the second dungeon. The second bottle, you use the flippers to go under a bridge, and now here's a perfect example of how in this game, everything's slower. Because whereas in the original, he just had one text box and they gave you the bottle, here he has multiple boring text boxes about birds, complete with unskippable pauses between some of them. Get on with it! The third bottle tries to distract you from the sheer casualization making it that easy by forcing you to tediously do a side quest involving getting milk in it first for someone lost with a sprained ankle. With them being lost in the mountains, ripping off Link's Awakening, I can't use the milk for a fairy until I get to go there. But I can't go there right away without the ability to lift the boulders. So I'm basically given a useless bottle early as a cock tease. I love that spin attacks will damage the enemies with their swords out somehow, except that's not nearly as reliable as the technique as I thought it would, so the enemies with their swords out are extremely annoying. The big main room of the second dungeon is confusing at first. At first, it took me a bit to get used to the idea that I could fuse with walls, and had to do that to progress and stuff, because I played Link to the Past so many times. I love that the tornado rod can extinguish flames, because the wind can blow out fire instead of fanning it and spreading it, apparently. The problem is the way it introduces it to you. It's cool that you have the fire bubbles now, needing this weapon to be damaged, but it destroys the appeal of being able to extinguish the fire of multiple bubbles at once when they all are capable of getting their fire back after some time and run around somehow despite just being skulls. And by the time you've chased down one of them, the other two have regained their fire. It would be better if they all just dropped down and stayed still at best. I love using the tornado rod to go up to wind gusts and ride them to other areas. And I like walking down toward the fan in order to somehow be sent up a floor instead of being hurt by falling to the spinning fan, like in Wind Waker. However, again, it really sucks that the wall fusing has a time limit and you have to stop and recharge your meter for everything. In fact, it doesn't even refill all the way when you go to another room, which you would expect of a regenerating meter in a video game. So a lot of the time, the level design isn't made for the time limit, almost as if the regenerating meter was just a last-minute decision, and you have to stop and wait pace-breakingly for the meter to fill up, so that you won't end up phasing out of a wall into a bottomless pit from rushing, or from going all over the place with wall fusing not knowing that you're wasting your time until you run out of energy and fell to your death. Having to stop constantly to refill a meter reminds me of playing as Silver the Hedgehog in 06. Nobody liked falling to their deaths because they hovered and forgot to wait until they had the full energy to hover again. And the fact that the meter regenerates just makes the fact that there is a meter for this feel all the more arbitrary. Just make it infinite at that point, you're almost there. And what's frustrating is that they have jars to refill the regenerating meter, which is good, you're almost there, but they barely have any of those jars. They seem to completely stop having them after a certain point. So, it's frustrating. And it's also cool that you use a tornado rod to go over spiked rolling pins that you arbitrarily can't just take advantage of invincibility frames to walk past anymore. Seeing how many different creative ways that you can use a tornado rod in this dungeon, where it feels like every single time you use it, it's for a new way, now makes perfect sense to me that I got the idea to use a tornado rod to get the key on the ledge. Especially since the place from which you have to fuse with the wall to be high up enough to get the key isn't exactly as obvious as the solution of just use a tornado rod north of the key. I like that you can use a tornado rod to land on moving platforms from below, but here's where we come to the first major problem of the dungeon. First off, having so many different dud levers that just summon enemies, or in one case permanent fire, is tedious. Worst of all, I got stuck here. I know from the excellent map that's always at the bottom of the screen in dungeons that there's supposed to be a key and a ring of fire. But I pulled every lever and I beat every enemy, and I went to every room I got access to. Isn't it great this game is so non-linear that I can't go to the next dungeon without beating this one? The next day, I looked it up in a guide. Oh, I have to fuse with the wall above where the key would fall, and then I can go to the left twist switch. The problem is that I tried going left fusing with the wall, and I got stopped by an inconveniently placed chandelier. Logically, if you're part of the wall and the wall is behind chandeliers, they shouldn't be an obstacle for you. But the point is, I went left and the game told me I was making a mistake and there was nothing for me over there. So I stopped trying to go left. It would have been better if it didn't matter which elevation you went left from in the second dungeon. It would have been better if you still got to the switch to drop the key. Instead, the game has trial and error Unleashed HD style where it expects you to do the very same thing it just punished you for, slightly differently just because. After that, I fought a tedious pair of mini-bosses where they regain their fiery invincibility after the tornado rod removes it, which shouldn't happen, and the most tedious part of that fight is that for some arbitrary reason, attacking them knocks you backwards a little. So you have to constantly stop to move closer to them. It's not fun, the fight just drags out and is boring with you mashing B. After that, there's a switch puzzle room where stepping on switches activates certain gust generators, and twice I pressed the wrong switches and had to reset the puzzle. The switches don't really have any visual indication of which ones go to which fans or anything. It's not like they're color-coded or anything, so it's trial and error. There's a part where there's a choice between two switches and you have to hit the top one to activate a fan that's really not in focus of the camera all the way to the left of you, while the bottom switch activates the fan right north of you. That was annoying, but again, it's really great how the dungeon never stops having new ideas. It just keeps being more and more creative with the wind and the tornado rod. But I got to another part of the dungeon where I was wandering in circles. Not the best direction, this place. At first I walked to the right from the mini-boss room and immediately got blown south to a pit by a permanent gust of the wind because I couldn't really see the northern staircase since it was below a graded floor, and thus out of focus. And then I wandered around and shot an arrow diagonally at a crystal switch to activate a big fan. There was another section of the dungeon where I was forced to fight a million different bubbles, which really sucked because the tornado rod drained so much of the meter that it was empty for the majority of the fight. This is one of the biggest problems with the game. I had to constantly wait around not doing anything because after the meter runs out, it takes several tedious seconds to start filling back up from the bottom. Yeah, it's not bad enough it runs out, it has to waste even more time filling up from the bottom instead of completely regenerating right away. Or at least after a few seconds. It was just tedious. So it was just tedious, and so was the boss fight. It does have an interesting concept of using the tornado rod to get on top of it and attack it, and then having to attack it to be able to get on top of it again. But I turned against it the minute I was knocked into a bottomless pit. A bottomless pit in the boss arena of the second dungeon, which the camera didn't show me as being there. Yes, the entire arena is surrounded by a pit, and every time you're knocked into it, it doesn't feel like your fault. You get arbitrarily knocked backwards a little just attacking the boss. Something that never happened in Link to the Past unless you were attacking those hard hat beetles. And while I get that maybe the steam shooting out of the boss is really hot, it hurting you still feels very arbitrary. It should be like orange or something. I kept getting too close to the steam from impatience getting hurt from it, when it doesn't look like a mere wind gust should be able to hurt me. And you have to hit it so much to be able to go on top of it. I really hate that I have to sit through a several second long loading time for the title screen every single time I turn the game on. It's so boring and the original game never pulled this on you. And after I beat the dungeon, I still didn't have the gloves necessary to lift the stone that would let me go to Death Mountain. Since the second dungeon didn't give those gloves to me, I had no idea how I was supposed to progress with the game. So I hit another roadblock. Why did the fortune teller have an option for the wins when I already completed that goal? Him not charging you doesn't make up for not removing that option when it's no longer relevant. I was forced to go to the fortune teller to find out in less than 10 years that to get the power glove, I had to go inside a house near the mountain that you have no reason to enter in the original game because it was empty, and talk to a guy that didn't exist in the original and isn't an elf like the ones cutting down the tree here. That was intuitive, wasn't it? Why couldn't they just have had the power glove in the second dungeon where it belonged? Oh, right. More overworld padding. When you first enter Death Mountain, they have a pointless unskippable cutscene showing you some lava at the top of the mountain for no reason, and then boulders start falling. But the boulders take so long to fall that they don't work as an obstacle. Death Mountain was really annoying in the original game because you constantly had to deal with these boulders falling down the mountain above in unpredictable ways, but this game actually learned from that mistake and doesn't have that problem. Only to keep the second most irritating thing about the mountain from the original, the invincible enemies that turn into stone walls blocking your way to attack them. But they're even worse here because at least in the original game, like with the bubbles, you could kill them by using the magic powder on them to make them vulnerable. Here, there's no reason these enemies should exist at all. You don't have any sort of way to deal with them. You don't have the Quake medallion at all. So why would you put these enemies in the game? The falling boulders are predetermined to fall in specific circular areas of the mountains, which is much easier to avoid. Sometimes they land on the boulders with rubies in them that you can destroy with bombs or the hammer anyways. Of course, they're just green rupees, so whatever. These boulders resemble the rolling ones in caves and you have to avoid because they knock you backwards annoyingly and act as a wall if you walk into them. They naturally lead you to use the hammer on them and find out you can, in fact, destroy them that way because there's a chest in a cave with them that you can only reach using the hammer, and then you can only progress by destroying a boulder. So that's intuitive. The problem is that they can also be destroyed by bombs, but that's not a very good idea because when a bomb explodes, it gets rid of stuff in your meter. So you'll be throwing lots of bombs and end up with an empty meter getting tossed around by the boulders. It wasn't a fun first experience. Maybe they shouldn't have let you use bombs on them at all if it's such a bad idea to. Also, they really should have made the boulders clearly cracked to indicate that you can affect them with the hammer at all. You can access the east side of the mountain really early because you can get the hookshot from the rental shop, and if you want to use the third bottle, you have to go there to give milk to the stranded guy, who magically is healed from his sprained ankle by the milk. The problem is that despite being able to get here so early, they still have the Lynels dealing tons of damage for this point in the game, and while firing long-distance projectiles at that. Isn't that a little unbalanced? Isn't that a difficulty spike? Especially for hero mode. They're all over the place, and worst of all, the absolute proof that they shouldn't be this early on, they're a brick wall of health that I couldn't bother myself to defeat. Let this be foreshadowing to the rest of the game. At the very least, the cave on the east side is fun. It's a really fun drop from platforms at the right times to land on other ones puzzle, where the fun comes from being so exhilarating. It's about timing, so it's like a platforming challenge in a Zelda game. Very refreshing. There's even a piece of heart to get here. Although the problem with that is you have to rely on hitting the fling upward switches with the hammer at the right times. But those fling upward switches have a delay, which makes the timing unintuitive. It's bad enough that swinging the hammer has a small delay by itself. It feels like a good second before you'll be flung upwards. That's fine in the Tower of Hera, but not in a strict timing challenge full of lava like this. Which, I would remind you, is the first time that you'll probably even see these challenges. So it's backwards. They're supposed to introduce a challenge in a safe environment so you can figure out what it does and how to do it, and then make it more challenging. But chances are you're going to come here as soon as you can and have to deal with this as the first time you see this challenge. At least the lava doesn't give you a game over like I'd expect. It just robs you of not even a heart, and respawns you right at the last place you fell. Once I was done with this cave though, I was disappointed to learn there are practically no caves after that, aside from the worthless Great Fairy Cave. Why even have those? Why not just have fairy fountains so you can catch fairies and restore health? And it's unintuitive that the Mai is under a regular rock and not the giant boulder. Although that was nice in the game in the sense that I didn't have the Titan's Mitt yet, but they shouldn't have misled you by putting that boulder there.